Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your Black Moon Lilith in your natal chart in the 4th house of home and family. And the 4th house is the domestic side of life. Black Moon Lilith here can shake things up in this regard, and there can be a rebellious attitude to what this sector represents. I have I've always believed that the 4th house is associated with the mother, simply because that is the domain of the feminine energy. But obviously, especially nowadays, we don't have such, ironclad gender roles that you can't have a father who's much more almost what we would say maternal, but talking about nurturing, and who loves to cook and do all that stuff, and the woman is the more aggressive, go-getting, career-oriented person. So I still like to be more exact about that. So I'm going to interpret this as the mother. I will leave that to the individual if they had a father who was more like that, or some other caregiver, because not everybody grows up with their mother or their father. So Black Moon Lilith is something I've been saying because I've been doing this series, that of all of the astrological influences, I think this has been the hardest one for me to fully wrap my brain around. And one of the big reasons for that is that there's a lot of contradictory, or at least different types of information about Black Moon Lilith. And it doesn't seem to always follow, let me put it this way, there doesn't seem to be a general consensus about certain characteristics. You get some who are treating it almost like Chiron or Pluto, where it's a trauma, it's a shadow self. And I think that you can get away with characterizing it that way. But there are other people that really talk about the rebellious aspect of going against convention in whatever area that it represents. Well, and also the feminine angle. Now, obviously, there are men who have this placement as well, and I would say for men, it can be about the feminine being something that is shunned, and maybe wanting to express the feminine side more, but not being able to, or maybe rejecting it out of hand because of something that it symbolizes for you that makes you uncomfortable. So there's all kinds of things, but it does feel very psychological. It feels, I think I even heard or read the word karmic attached to it. So I'm just like pulling up a website that I have used before, just to kind of organize my thoughts and to get the basic ideas that they discuss and put them in my own words. And this website in particular is called advancedastrology.com. And one of the things that just came to my mind before I even looked anything up was, I thought to myself that Black Moon Lilith in the 4th house to me might be somebody who's a scapegoat in the family of origin, because that's what the 4th house can be too, the family of origin. And the reason I think so is because I mentioned on another video about how the scapegoat is the one who sees through the lies, the bullshit of the family. And I can't remember what video I was doing and what it was all about, but it was something that I had read once about dysfunctional families. And then I just recently read something that the person who is the empath, is the one who tends to be the scapegoat, because they are the one in the family who sees the truth of what's going on, and they will tell the truth and they'll get punished for it, because part of the dysfunctional family is you don't talk about this. That's probably the number one rule. You never discuss this. You pretend it doesn't exist. And that makes it that much more dysfunctional. So I could see the Lilith person being that individual, and therefore getting the brunt of the abuse, the criticism, the whatever, the singling out. So you may not feel like you belong to that family or within that home. And that's what I mean by the scapegoat. I mean the person who doesn't feel like they belong, because the family is a group. It's something where you either fit in or you don't. And it's very painful not to be accepted, or not to feel like you are like the others, and therefore on the outside looking in. And this is because human beings are social creatures, even though some people obviously are introverts. They prefer to be alone. I'm an introvert. They enjoy their own company, or just like quiet activities. But especially when you are growing up, I think there is a strong desire for the cohesion within a family unit. And when you don't have that, and especially when you feel that you are singled out, it can be very distressing. And so, yes, you could have experienced abuse. And the fourth house is about roots. It's about security. The home is supposed to be a secure place. So this can indicate that you did not feel safe in your home with your family of origin. And this is a wound that is like Chiron in the fourth, or Saturn in Cancer, where the mother figure, you may not have gotten the nurturing that you needed. And that can feel very hurtful and that kind of thing. You may have had a parent who embodied who represented the spirit of Lilith. I would like to say the mother, because of how I see this house. And so this would typically be a mother who rejects the conventional expectations of what a mother does. Maybe she refuses to cook, maybe she refuses to clean, or she is very involved in her own life. Maybe she's like a career woman. That kind of thing doesn't, to me, I don't think that in and of itself would be problematic, because sometimes if you have, especially if you are a female and your mother is like this, you can actually feel inspired through her rebellion and feel self-empowered in your own right, especially in past decades. Not necessarily nowadays is not that big of a deal. There are a lot of women are just career women. It's not even there's nothing newsworthy about that. But the real core issue is about the idea of being taken care of, and that's what nurturing is. And a child doesn't have the capacity to understand about what the needs are of the parents, their personal needs. Children are very egocentric, and that is a natural part of the maturation process. There's nothing wrong with children being egocentric. It's something that they will grow out of if they have proper nurturing and adults who are emotionally mature. They will be able to do that. But when a child, in some cases, when a child is really neglected, where they have to fend for themselves at a young age, they have to hyper focus on themselves. And so when you see malignant, I would say narcissists in general, covert or malignant narcissists, they are hyper focusing on themselves because they had to do so when they were young. They didn't get proper nurturing. So this is one of the main ways I think people become narcissistic, is not getting proper care when they're very young. The reason that this is a very important thing to heal is that if the Lilith person decides to reproduce at some point, or maybe doesn't even decide, it just happens because they're not being aware of what they're doing and taking necessary precautions if they don't want to have children at that point, that they can easily fall into this role of some type of acting out in the home life. Some of it coming from their background, but also because of their own, what I would call, how they interpret what happened to them. This is, we could call this the ancestral karma situation, where there might be a lot of negative stuff, skeletons in the closet, that the family of origin has all piled up. And that in and of itself creates these cyclical behaviors that don't seem to go away. You might know within your own family or other people that you've observed where they tend to have the same themes come up in terms of dysfunction. Like maybe it's addiction, maybe it's mental illness, or some other thing, violence. And another, there's another site that I'm consulting as well called geocult.org. They mention overprotection, which is when we talk about narcissism with parents, this is one of the ways that parents who are narcissists trap their children, is by being overprotective and treating their children as if they are incapable of taking care of themselves. I'm thinking of that word, that they are incompetent. That was what I was searching for. And so they mentioned that type of karma of the family, and it's very interesting because they say that, they even mention moving frequently. So that's part of the rootlessness of the fourth house. And while you don't look at that as a form of abuse, because, maybe the parent had stability issues, they've had financial problems or what have you, it can still be quite traumatizing to have to endure that constant moving from one residence to another. And one of the things that they say, they use the term lack of support. And so that's a very interesting one, because lack of support can manifest in different ways. It can be parents who do not seem to support their children in terms of finding themselves, finding out what their strengths are, their talents are. For instance, a lot of parents will sign their children up for different activities, sports, whatever, and through these activities, the child discovers what they're good at, and some parents, they just are neglectful in that way. And of course, there are people who can't afford to do things like that. Maybe they either can't pay for it or they don't have, it's like the time to be like being very attentive to their child because they're working a lot, they don't make enough money. But I'm not really talking about those kinds of situations. It's more, but even those situations where it's not malicious, it's just not happening, that can be a message that the child feels that they are not important enough to care about and to guide. Parents are ultimately what we would call guides for the child. Some are poor guides, some are very wise guides, but they are guides. And some are AWOL, they're just not there. So they also mention the cases where the Lilith person has to leave home early. Now, I'm wondering if they're talking about their children. I'm trying to say, wards. I think wards are the person that's taking care of them. So yeah. So the point is that you may leave home prematurely, which in the Western world, at least, is before the age of 18 because of severe abuse, for instance, in the family of origin. And this can also lead to women who hate housework, hate cooking. Again, we're in a stage where women are not exclusively assigned to household tasks, but they still kind of are. There can be maybe there's an aversion to getting married. Maybe you avoid that side of life, and this can be true for men as well. They may avoid women and see that as something they don't want to deal with. And so the thing that I think is really important here is that if you say to yourself, the buck stops here, that I'm not going to allow another generation to be put through this karmic pattern. And I really believe it's not that schmancy fancy. It's all about forgiveness. And they mentioned that in one of the sites. I think it's called elsa.com or something like. No, it was a different one. And the reason that forgiveness is so important is that it's easy to feel that anger because apparently Lilith is also about rage. And it's easy if you were abused, if you were the black sheep, to believe that these are bad people, this is a bad situation. Maybe it's, more than one generation. Grandparents were monsters too, or something like that. The point is to let go of that anger through forgiveness. And forgiveness has nothing to do with whether or not you see these people in your family. If they're very dangerous, if they're very abusive, then that's a dangerous thing. Even if it's psychological abuse, it can be very dangerous to be around that kind of person especially when you feel very vulnerable still. But the point is that you're not carrying that rage anymore. Because to me, when I think of Lilith, and I'm trying to think of the higher manifestation versus the lower one, it's just like anything else. It's like the higher manifestation of Lilith can be being your own person and being unashamedly authentic and not feeling like you have to conform to somebody else's rules. But when it's in the lower manifestation, the person is a rebel without a cause. And it can create a lot of complications for the person's life. And that's really why I'm saying this, is because it may be warranted. I mean, it may be justified, but it's an acting out. It's not really being self-empowered. There is a difference. And when you can mother yourself, when you can love yourself and not be thinking about what you didn't get, then you are on the path to healing. And that goes along with forgiveness, because you're like, you know what? I don't need somebody outside of myself to give me what I need. I can do that for myself. Yes, when I was a child, that would have been nice, but I don't need it now. I'm able to do that. And if you have a lot of conflict within yourself about starting a family, don't minimize that. Be very intentional, because that's what I was trying to say earlier, like, not passing it on to a new generation. If your sun sign is in Cancer, or you have Cancer inner planets, or other fourth house, like the sun in the fourth house, for instance, you may feel a strong pull towards motherhood. And if you're a father, that could be being a parent as well. And yet you feel like a strong resistance to it. Do pay attention to that. Don't discount it because you want to please a partner, and you don't want that person to leave because they want kids and you're not sure. Talk to someone. Get clear in your head how you're going to do this, or if you want to do it, because that could be a big hurdle for some people who have experienced this, is that they have very strong ambivalence about having children, and you don't want to do it for the wrong reasons. But likewise, you don't want to totally reject it out of hand because you are reacting to what you have experienced either. Sometimes this can indicate that you had a parent abandon you, die, that there was a divorce, and you weren't able to see that other parent all the time, and that was very traumatic for you. I read a book by someone who had a very, troubled life, and it was a memoir, and she was talking about, she had a very bad drug problem, and she was talking about how her mother left when she was about, I think, 5 years old, or maybe even younger than that, and she was raised, I think, by her aunt and her father, but she was raised by her father. And that she eventually became a drug addict. Now, it's very unusual for mothers to abandon the family, but this could be one of those situations where that maybe you were raised by your grandmother, and your mother was out on the streets and she was a drug addict. And that kind of thing can create a lot of rage, because not only because of not getting what you needed, but also you're absorbing. That's what, when they talk about like the karma, the ancestral karma, being raised by the grandmother, it shows that there was some kind of missing link. These families where the grandparents are raising the kids. What is going on that the parents are not in the picture? Neither one of the parents, the father or the mother. So it just shows that there's some kind of a breakdown there. And it's not just coming out of thin air and there's no origin to it. There are reasons why this happens. And the traumas of the family of origin can facilitate this. Even if the grandparents are pretty solid, there still could be other things going on that led to the way that the grandparent raised the mother or father of your parent, if you have been raised by your grandparent, that set the stage for one of your parents to become an addict and just be on the streets, or just be away, rejecting having children, being a parent. That's a very strong Lilith thing to me, is rejecting the role as a parent, because I think that I have never had children, and maybe, you could say I'm idealizing being a parent because I don't have children, but I think that is such an honor and a gift. And yes, sometimes if the parent is a teenager, they're not going to appreciate that because they feel like they're being forced to grow up too quickly and losing their fun, losing their freedom. So that resentful nature could put all those things into motion. But, even in those cases where you say somebody is a teenage parent, why are they a teenage parent? That can speak to ancestral trauma. Something going on in that family that caused that young person maybe to engage in sexual activity at a premature age, or whatever, So anyway, I'm going to leave it there, I think, but I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.